Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is Jeff Porkburger, inventor of Midwestern charity event cuisine. So the bad news this week is that we don't have a house to clean, but the good news is that we're going to be doing something that people have been asking me to do in every video that I show of my house, which is replace that ugly, nasty, scarred backsplash above my stove. I want to show you how easy this is to do by yourself, and in my opinion, this is the least expensive thing that you can do to a kitchen that has the most dramatic effect on how it looks. Well, I mean, aside from like setting it on fire, that's really cheap to do, and that can pretty dramatically change the way your kitchen looks. So let's say it's the cheapest way to have the most positive dramatic effect on your kitchen. So the first thing we have to do is remove the old backsplash, and this is kind of a peel and stick sort of thing that they kind of stapled on, and I don't know, it's put up there in a really weird way. The easiest way for us to remove that is to use an oscillating saw, or sometimes people call it a multi-tool. I call it a buzzy cutty thing. So we take the buzzy cutty thing and we go through that first layer so we can just peel that back. Once we get all that removed, I'm going to mark and cut one side of these little pre-fastened tiles so that it's straight all the way down one edge, and that's going to be an edge that butts up against a window frame. Now, if you have tiles that are all the same material, like let's say that it's granite or marble, you can use what they call a pair of nippers to cut stonework. If they're glass, you can use a pair of glass tile cutters. These happen to be the most annoying ones, which makes sense because I picked them out. But they have three materials. One of them is stone, one is glass, and the other one is aluminum. So I had to use three different cutting methods in order to get this cut square. If I would have had a tile saw, I could have just cut them right down the side and it would have been no big deal. But I'm not paying like $300 for a tile saw for one project. If I did this stuff all the time, it would be a different story. So if you have a tile saw, feel free to use that, and also shut up. I don't want to hear about your tile tool superiority. I have the tools that I have, and that's what I'm going to use. Don't be stanking up my room with your tile saw bragging. Putting the tile on the wall is actually fairly simple. We're just going to spread some tile adhesive onto the wall, and then we use what they call a notched trowel to spread that out and create little bitty lines of adhesive that go across our wood paneling. Now note, I am not a professional, and if you want to see how to do like a really professional job, there are tons and tons of YouTube channels to show you exactly how the pros do it. I'm just showing you that any idiot can do this because I am an idiot and I'm doing this. I can't do it as smooth as professionals, but I can at least do it. Once I get that adhesive on the wall, I'm going to do what they call back buttering the tile, and I'm going to say they call it that because I refuse to call it that. It sounds gross and weird, but I'm going to do that to the back side of the tile, and you're just putting adhesive on there too. Then you're going to smash that into the adhesive that's on the wall, make sure everything is flush and straight, and then we're going to tap that down very lightly with a rubber mallet, or if you don't have one of those, you can use a little block of wood and a regular hammer. You don't want to swing on this thing like it stole something. You're just giving it a little tap just to make sure that it seats itself in place. Kind of the same way that you would do your own kids if you wanted to make them seated. It's like you ask them once, and then if they don't sit down, you grab a hammer. Or I'm not good at metaphors. You're just tapping the tiles, what I'm saying. If you know what I mean. Hi-oh! So anyway, we're going to do that all the way across, and then you'll see the very last piece of tile that I put on the right-hand side. I don't cut that flush. I just leave it all staggered. Again, part of that's because I think it looks cool. The other part is that I just didn't want to cut all those things flush because I am a lazy piece of filth. I did have to cut those off just a little bit, like the bottom, I don't know, 2 or 3 rows of tile in order to fit, but that's a super easy fix. That's just cutting off the excess, which doesn't require me to cut glass or stone or break out the hacksaw. Those things are held together by like a mesh netting on the back. So if you have to cut those down to size the way that I did, you can just take any knife. You can even just grab a steak knife if you want out of your utensil drawer like a peasant. I personally used a box knife because I'm fancy, but the whole process is still the same. You put adhesive on the wall, trowel it with a notched trowel, back butter. God, it's such a gross word. The back part of the tile, stick it on, and then tap it with a rubber mallet or do the block of wood thing. Then make a note in your phone to go buy a rubber mallet because those things are super cool. Once you own a rubber mallet, you will find excuses to rubber mallet things. The only other place where I had to do some weird cutting was around these outlets and light switches. On the one on the right, I just needed to figure out how many rows of tiles I needed to cover things vertically, and then I just cut off a straight line on the right-hand side so it butted up against the outlet. I didn't do the same thing on the left-hand side because since I've got a double outlet, things were really, really weird. So on that side, I decided to piece things out tile by tile. And I did something that tile guys absolutely hate, which is I decided to make a little framework around my outlets and light switches with some of the leftover pieces. Specifically, I took the aluminum bars and hacksawed those off into basically a rectangle and then outlined those switch covers. Tile guys hate it because it's extremely amateurish and it's how people block things off who don't know what they're doing. I totally agree with them. Like if I would have hired somebody to do this for me and they did what I did, I would probably be mad and they'd receive a swift spin kick right in their neck junk. But I'm doing this job. I'm not a professional. I thought it looked fine for what it was. And honestly, it saved me a ton of headaches. But anyway, after I did that little framework thing, all I had to do was cut little pieces of tile down to size and just hand lay those until they butted up against the second outlet on the right hand side. So that's what we did. We let that set overnight, and then the next day I brought in Jason. And to show you how easy this stuff is to do, Jason has never touched a single tile project in his life. He has never grouted anything. He has never mixed grout. And even though he has zero experience doing this, I just told him what to do, and then he did it all himself. If you're wondering, there's not really a mix ratio that we use when we're mixing the grout, but there are two things to keep in mind. One, you want the grout to be about the consistency of toothpaste, and two, if you're using any tile that's made of glass, you want a special grout that doesn't have sand in it. Sanded grout will scratch glass. Another simple rule of thumb is that you want to come at all the cracks and crevices, usually at a 45-degree angle from all directions, both up and down, because you're pressing the grout into the cracks and you're also smoothing the grout. If you only go one direction, you're not going to completely fill in the gaps. So you're kind of pushing the grout into the crevices, and then you're using the edge of the floater, which is what they call that little flat, scrapey dealy. You're using the edge of that to kind of scrape the excess grout off at the same time. Now, you're going to get grout everywhere. Don't worry, that's a normal part of the process. And the way we're going to clean that up is we're going to leave the water running in the sink because we're going to wipe off a few tiles, then flip the sponge over, wipe it off on the clean side, and then we're going to really rinse the crap out of that sponge. Then we're going to repeat the process over and over until we've made one good pass across the tile. Then we're going to allow that to dry and then touch up any extra parts of the grout that has little pinholes in it or little missed areas or little gaps. Then we're going to go ahead and do the same exact process with the damp sponge. And every time you do this, when it dries, it's going to leave a thick haze over all the tiles. That's totally normal. That will happen because you'll have to do this process several times. So if it's your first time trying this out and you're wiping this down and then 10 minutes later you're like, oh my God, it looks like a powdered donut. Don't panic. It's supposed to look like that. Each time you wipe this down, there will be less and less haze. And then the very last time that you wipe it down, you'll use the sponge and then you'll follow it up with a microfiber towel. If you don't have a microfiber towel, it's fine. You can use paper towels or a kitchen rag or whatever. We used an ultra fine microfiber because we're better than you. You can tell that we're better than you because the ultra and ultra fine. It means it ain't get no finer than this, son. After that, I'm going to jump into running a bead of caulk all the way around the backsplash. Part of that is to protect and make sure water or grease doesn't get behind the backsplash, but the majority of running that around there is just purely for aesthetics. It hides any of the extra gaps. It helps seal up the wall and the backsplash, and it also just happens to look good. Quick reminder that we're headed toward 500,000 subscribers. I'll see you next weekend with a brand new cleaning video. Later.